I thought I'd start this video with a drawing. You can see a paneled room with a cased opening, a cabinet elevation, another panel here. These four panels are similar in size, but even on the drawing you can tell they're a little different. You've got the beams, you've got a tongue and groove ceiling, and you've got some doors here that are quite hard to tell on there, but you can kind of see they're basically a hidden door that we're working towards, with this one opening here and the dotted line going to the jamb. Of course, this room's not completely finished, but you can see it's similar to the drawings. We've got the tongue and groove ceiling. We've got an HVAC vent, and then we have two hidden doors there. I'll show you how they operate soon. Then coming in, we've got the cased opening with a panel jamb inside, and we've got the cabinet elevation with four equal panels, but they're very similar panels, one on the left and one on the right. The beams are centered as on the drawing, and then there's two more panels on the left and right of these doors, and in the middle, the smaller panel to the right is the door, and there are the doors ajar. There are the doors closed again with the shoe mold running through. So you can see the panel mold has been applied to the stile. The tongue and groove has been applied to the door. And when the door pivots, it's pivoting back here. So the back side of this door pushes into the closet, and the front side of the door pulls out. And the main reason, other than, well, there's a lot of reasons, you don't see a hinge the whole way in the panel mold operating. And down at the bottom, you see the shoe mold and base cap and panel mold. And the negative is right here, the door does hit. So we can only go to about 85 degrees with this door, which is acceptable. But a very good job done by the guys. You can see a faint line there. Same piece of base cap was used on this side as this side for the grain to carry through. You see here, the casing is nicely revealed. It comes out past the baseboard. There isn't a, we don't need a plinth block because the casing's so thick. These wires were strategically placed in the middle of this panel for the sconce to sit right in the center of the panel. And the architect told us the height he wanted them off the floor. In the baseboard, the receptacle is centered between the shoe molding, the top of the shoe molding, and the top of the flat piece of base. So we have a centered receptacle, and that took a lot of work. I think they added the shoe molding later, so the men had to raise the receptacle up a little bit to make sure it became centered. This inside baseboard, we've got a cope going this way, and this piece was kept long, and then Morgan or Jason coped it in, and then a nice, very tight reveal going down. Shoe molding the same way. Got a coupe piece of shoe. This stile is 3 inches, and this stile is 3 inches, so they're equal. But this one was longer, so this one is actually 3 3/4, and then this one was 3, and it was butt up against there. So it's important to not create a negative corner here. So this piece had to continue through. You can see the rails are flush they're pocket screwed from behind, and then the panel mold's applied to them. This is pocket screwed from behind, so there was not very many needs for fasteners here, although there's certainly a lot of needs. And you can kind of see a hint of a fastener in there. They were toe-nailed into the Cypress paneling. This receptacle we found out was going to be a switch, and it landed right on a stud, and it's centered on the panel. So the guys had to drill out for a receptacle cut-in box to fit inside there. Another thing to note is this stile goes all the way up and the rail stops between the stile. This piece of rail does not go through like that, but it actually is stopped here, and then this picks up and goes down. And that joint's real important to a millwork guy, that it's a consistent joint that goes down. You don't have a piece of trim running here, you have more of a door that's installed at that location. It looks more like a door to a house than it does a piece of trim running through the room. This piece of crown was returned on itself up at the top. The bullnose trim was just butt jointed into the casing. Here you see the architect has told us where to put the receptacle: the center of this panel, the center of this baseboard. There wasn't shoe shown on the drawing, but we did end up putting it in. This piece of crown is also shown. It's hard to see, I'm sure, but it's shown to return on itself against the casing. You can see these stile and rails. The stile is the vertical piece. The rail is what goes in between, and you can see that the stile continues through up into the bullnose, and then the rail butts into it. This piece is 3 inches, but we provided a piece that was 3 3/4, so this piece could be behind the casing, because we wouldn't want to try to deal with a negative inside corner back in there. Down at the bottom of this window, they mitered a piece of S4S and made it 2 inches thick with a miter. They mitered down the edge right here, and then they mitered across the top so there wouldn't be end grain showing, and it would have been okay if it was, but it's hard to find a piece this thick, particularly for this job. So they put a piece that's 2 inches thick this way with a miter on the top and on the side, and then a miter along this top edge. And it creates a real illusion that that is a very thick piece of wood. The only thing you can't tell is because it's not end grain here. Again, you can see the stile going all the way down. You can see how much thicker it really was. It was at 3 3/4 right here, but 3 inches is to the casing, and then it comes down, and then this is a continuous board, no panel, per the architect. And then the apron is the piece of casing. The apron lines up with the end of the casing, so it has the same reveal coming down. This 1/2 inch is similar to this 1/2 inch. We had some things out of plumb in the room, and you can see this stile. It's a little bit hard, but the stile to the right is a little bit thicker as you go down towards the bottom. But that's the joy of having a thicker piece here, and then a normal 3 inch piece here. And then again, I got a little thicker here, but as you go up towards the top, because maybe the door was out of plumb, as you come up towards the top, it's a very similar reveal. These beams, per the architect, were supposed to split this right in half and then come down. This bullnose was planned to just barely get capped by the beam. And then as you roll over the casing, because the room was well planned out, but it's a difficult room due to out of plumb things, this ended up being notched, and we got that approved from the architect as well. And this beam kind of morphed into that casing. It's got a little bit of a flat spot on the bottom of it instead of the pointy spot. So Jason or Richard had to cut this bottom angle to sit nice and tight on top of the casing. Same as this one here. He did a nice job, even though it's hard to see it. It's important to get it right. Due to the room being out of plumb and the doors being different in height, they had to notch this a little differently. And then as you can see, as we roll around the room, because we're very level, that the beams hang down a little bit more on this side, but there's just very little to do. You know, the faults have to land somewhere, and you have to strategically place where the parts are that are going to be different. These HVAC returns, as you can see, they land centered on the beams, and we had to do this much before the beams went in. We had to make sure we, put the vent centered. The HVAC guy had put it off to the left or right, so we had to move that. We had to paint everything black behind it, and then carefully route the slots in there in the field. Good job to Jason on that one. Got a good bit of shadow line here, but here's another vent that's cut in. And then I just wanted you to notice the plugs that were put in. So we get a 6-inch timber mate screw, or probably a 12-inch timber mate screw that goes up into the blocking that the builder provided. And it did a great job of pulling the beam up into the ceiling. We're quite worried that there'd be a gap there, but as you can see, it's very minimal going up to the ridge beam at the top. So you can see the ridge beam up at the top, and it comes down. Jason and Kimmy did a good job when we've got a 1x6 tongue and groove here, and then it turns to a diagonal or actually level, and then it turns back into the ceiling going that way. And the architect, believe it or not, wanted us to make sure that every gap lines up. So it's hard to pick up on this in this. I'm going to just put a close up in there a little bit. But every joint is a custom piece that comes together as you go up the ceiling. Very subtle detail, hard to pick up, but I wanted to show that off as excellent work that the guys did. So it's 1x6 there, and then as you get into this wall, it's more like 1x3 and 11/16, somewhere in that vicinity going up. But the joint tracks around on the wall, and then it goes down on the ceiling. Goes right around the room. See some more vents. Comes to this side, and it tracks around. There's another vent, and then the real star of the show was this vent. It's about 20 by 20, and we had to talk with the builder and make sure the HVAC had enough air movement to allow us to do a vent that size and take up, we're taking up a lot of wood. A metal vent would take up a very small amount of wood, but we ended up taking up quite a bit of wood, so the airflow is restricted. But we did get approval from everybody to do it. The filter is located at another location in the house, so they changed the filter in the attic. So all that happens here is the airflow. So the men had to move this HVAC to center. It was off center a little bit, so we had to do some additional framing to make it centered. And then Jason in the field had to carefully cut that out and install a piece that would be flush per the architect's instructions, which made it really difficult for the installation and the manufacture of it. But those joints and that also line up, although it's a bit hard to see from here. And we installed it with 4 trim screws, one on each corner, to allow for easy access in the future. And of course we painted it black behind there so you wouldn't see anything coming through. So here's another hidden door. You can kind of see the joint at the bottom. Needs some kind of magnet closer. But when you open the door, you can watch the baseboard and the shoe molding open up to you. The hinge is used here because it's an in-swing door. We used a different hinge. We didn't have to pivot it because the whole door swung in and it gets out of the way. The baseboard gets out of the way during the hinge process. And when you close the door, they come back together again. And on this side, it comes back together. So generally, if you've got an in-swing door, you can truly make it invisible. But in general, the outswing door is very difficult because when the door's opening out into the room, there's nowhere for the shoe molding and the baseboard to go. So really the only way to make a hidden door is to have an in-swing door. And that's what's special about this door, is it's actually an outswing door. It opens out into the room, but at the hinge location, it actually pivots over here. So it opens in for the first 4 or 6 inches of the door, and then the rest of the door opens out. So it opens in just like the other door. If it had to just open out, if this door just opened out, the baseboard and the shoe molding would be in the way of the swing of the door. Unless you had a really deep hinge right here. If the hinge was maybe 3 inches deep, so the butt of the hinge was way out into the room, then the door would open up away from the base. But in this case, the best solution was a pivot. You can kind of get a hint of the hardware up here. You can kind of get a hint of the hardware at the bottom, but it's just a pivot. And you can see it's about 6 inches behind the edge of the door. This pivot hinge, this screw right here, when you tighten the screw, the pin drops out of here and into the door. And when you loosen the screw, there's a lever. So as you loosen the screw, it actually pulls the pin out of the door and allows you to take it off. This piece here is a piece of door stop, so the door closes against it, but it's also a door stop for not over opening the door. And that's why the shoe molding isn't damaged, because the shoe molding doesn't stop it from opening. It's actually the door stop that stops it. So we've got the closet doors there, got a panel jamb, and then we've got the cabinetry like we mentioned before, and the hidden door going into the powder room. I wanted to talk about the panel jamb. We've got a receptacle that'll be planned for at the bottom. We've got a light switch in the middle. We've got a sconce on the face. Now whenever we're in a room, these things are going to be haphazard. This wire was over here at the beginning of the job, and we could have easily thought, well, let's just drill it here, but it was laid out on the drawing to go here. And as the carpenter or millwork guy, you got to figure out where to drill this hole to bring the wire through. The electrician sometimes will get it close, but there's no way for the electrician to have the imagination of the architect and know exactly where to put it. So this is just a paneled cased opening. We've got casing on the back side that's been painted. We've got a nice hardwood floor, and then a transition into the stone floor. We got the receptacle down at the bottom that we could have cut in, or maybe there's a reason it's a circle. Maybe it's going to be a sill outlet or something like that. Then across the ceiling of this panel jamb, there's one large panel with the tight joint. It's almost like hardwood flooring in this room. The paneling is just butt joint together. And we could have easily put a gap here in between each board, but the builder wanted it tight. So we had to, that was one of the first hurdles we had to go over is, do you want this tight or do you want there to be a gap? Sometimes the gap is a dime, or sometimes they call it a nickel gap, which is closer to 1/8 of an inch. And then, and sometimes it's tight. You can see the boards aren't exactly tight because they are shrinking over time. You know, things tend to dry out, and in the summer it'll probably get bigger again, but that gives us some flexibility. So you got the panel jamb ceiling, and this was drawn by the architect. And then we got a mirrored panel jamb over here. So the panel jamb on this side with the receptacle, and then this side here, Jason's done a nice job putting vents in the bottom of the toe kick. And then this is actually a hidden door, a fixed rail, and then another hidden door. And the yellow tape is there just as an easy way to open it. So of course we use the same material to manufacture the inside of this cabinet. Jason's put these struts on the back of this door to help keep it flat. We've actually got 1 inch, and this door is close to 1 7/16 inches thickness overall. These hinges say they can open up 1 3/16 inches door. So in order to modify and make the hinge open a little bit bigger, you've got to scoop the back side of that hinge so that the hinge kind of thinks it's a thinner door. We put so many hinges on this door because it's quite large, and we wanted to make sure that over time it didn't sag. In the future, they're going to put a stone countertop here. The men put a nice piece of wood right here so the stone top didn't have to go around the corner, because this is a fixed style on purpose. And then this is a nice place for the door to stop. I've got a magnet catch at the top. This magnet catch is kind of cool. It's actually adjustable, so you turn it out, and it gets deeper. The gap between the back of the, you can see there's a gap there now, and then if I tighten it up, it'll go back to where it was. And so that'll allow the catch, or the metal plate, to touch the magnet and be at the location you want. The guys really put it in at a negative or a 0, but you could easily have set this stop just a little bit further back and then done some adjustment for that. On the door side, it's actually a nail with a head on it, but it's not very deep, and it goes in pretty nicely. You put the head of the nail on the magnet, and the nail, the sharp end points out. And when you close the door, it kind of self marks. We put a magnet on the top, and then we put one on the bottom. And the reason is because the door is just a little bit bowed. This will ensure, you know, a nice look, because you got to expect a door this large to bow a little bit, and this kind of just locks it right into place. Guys did a great job on that. There's a small reveal along the side of the door, of course, and a nice reveal along the top. I worked hard on that. And down at the bottom, there's a nice reveal across the whole bottom. And of course, these hinges are adjustable. So this is the fixed panel, and then the homeowners are going to open this up, and inside there they're going to have a refrigerator, and if all goes well, they'll grab the handle of the refrigerator and it'll open up. I've got about 28 inches clear in this cabinet, and we got about 28 inches deep. The refrigerator is about 24, but because we needed to also recess it in past the handle, so we had to bring the refrigerator into probably around 26 inches, and they'll put a receptacle back there. Jason's also made this removable with a magnet on the back, a slot for the airflow of the refrigerator, and then a magnet over on that side. And this is quite tight to put in there, but he did a great job. It's not too tight, it's just nice and tight. And that'll just stay in place. And the slots are there for the airflow again, so the fridge can breathe. Hopefully that works well enough. And then again, we have a magnet on the top, and then the magnet on the bottom. You can kind of hear it click in. On the top it clicked, and then just the extra encouragement to hold that door flat. This cabinet was designed with 2 refrigerators. This refrigerator will get a panel on it. I think this is the panel. It's 3/4 of an inch thick to allow the hinges to operate and not bind. And you can see this is even binding before the panel's on there, but this will come out a little bit further. And the reason we can't put a thicker panel on there is there's nowhere for it to go. Even at 3/4, it's very hard. But I think when this comes out, I'm hopeful. See how the door pulls forward a little as it opens? I'm hoping that's going to clear the front edge of this door. So it'll be a 3/4 thick door and a 1-inch thick door. They should come together pretty well when this opens up. This is the ice maker. And then we've got 2 drawers. There's no hinging on these, so the thickness mattered a little bit less. But I still made a 3/4 inch panel for those. We've got some scoop drawers for plumbing. We're hopeful that that the plumber's going to be able to work his magic. The center of the sink will obviously be right in the middle. So our hope is the drain will go down and up and then right into that. And we've kind of pre-planned this at the shop. The guys built that drawer to sit inside there. So this one here, just for looks, the architect wanted a door with pullouts. This one here is a trash drawer, a little bit of bag storage in the back, and then a nice utility drawer up above. That'll all be hidden by the one door. Done a nice job. We got a piece of MDF, 1-inch MDF, because they wanted a 1.5-inch radius. You can see the veneer stuck on there. And then the cabinet's just barely wider, because again, we did create a negative inside corner here because there's no wood behind here. But it was important because they're going to actually put a piece of backsplash here, and then they're going to put this panel molding on, and behind that panel molding, instead of this tongue and groove, they're going to put a mirror here. So we've done a nice job planning for them. The stone top has no overhang at all, so it's just going to die into that cabinet as well. The stone splash will sit there, and then again the panel mold. Guys have done a good job just nailing that panel mold up, so the finisher can do his job finishing this, and if he doesn't forget, he'll also finish that. And when we come back after the mirror is installed and the stone is in several weeks, we'll be able to cut that to fit, put it around the mirror, and so that's kind of preparation. You know, it's easy for those 4 pieces to be lost. So Jason obviously and Morgan thought hard about it and decided, let's just nail the panel molding to the sheathing. That way it doesn't get lost. I love it. We've got some extra plugs that went into the beams above. The builder's nervous that over time the beams may shrink and that gap potentially could increase. That's up against the ceiling, and we just dig out those plugs, tighten the beam, and then put new plugs in. Wouldn't be exactly as simple as that, but that's a potential. Beautiful window. There's the panel jamb. There's the cabinet, the mirror. Not only does the baseboard sit behind the back edge of this casing, but also the shoe molding is captured behind the casing to keep you from having to do a little funky return right there. So it's an excellent piece of casing that works well in this room. This room's a pretty hard room to work in, I'm sure, and also get light in. But this is the back side of that hidden door to the bathroom. So it actually, maybe I'll look at the top. So it actually swings on the back side of the jamb. Generally a door would hang on this side of the jamb and open into the room. But because we wanted that hidden quality, the door opens on this side. And you can see it has a natural stop, you know, at that location. And you've got the hinges and the way the door closes. It's on this side of it swings in, even though it's on this side of the jamb. You've got the stile and rail right here. You've got the tongue and groove right there. And well, actually, we've capped the tongue and groove, and then so it goes right from stile and rail to, and then the T and G right here is covered up by the jamb. And these hinges are quite nice and easy to adjust, although not perfect, but just easier. It's a hard ceiling that I thought I'd just at least look at. So you've got a HVAC vent, you've got a small piece of pencil molding going around the room. There's a mirror going in on this wall, so the men put a small piece of 1/4 inch plywood all the way across. We'll slide that out and the mirror will slide into its place. So this whole wall will be a mirror. This cabinet had a removable face frame, so they were able to remove this piece. To get this cabinet in the room, because it's such a tight room, we got the cabinet in first, put the face frame on it. And this is a 1-inch face frame. This is a false door right here. And then we've got a 1-inch door here with some adjustable shelving. Not a whole lot of storage opportunity here, but a little bit that the homeowner wanted to take advantage of. We've got a nice fitting filler all the way up. And a nice fitting piece of baseboard dying into the front of it. And over here, the baseboard just tucked neatly behind. No real need to return that base against the wall on the other side. And the same thing here. Nice fitting base. And I'll have a toilet here. It's a very awkward way to open a door. I'm kind of opening the door and then you're going to end up quite in the bathroom, but the builder wanted to hide the toilet. So this door will open to 90 degrees. The toilet barely fits. And then you have to close the door, use the restroom, and you can go. Yeah, to speak more about that door, we did have a lot of discussion with them. It would make a whole lot of sense to have the door opening this way, access to the toilet, you close the door. But under a lot of careful consideration, they decided that way you could leave the door open, not see the toilet, and you'll see a pretty powder room in there. See the corner of that casing? Almost touches the ceiling, but it doesn't. Sometimes the architect will specify that that corner touches the ceiling, but in this case he wanted it away from the ceiling just a little bit. We could have easily done that just by making the pieces of wood a little longer, and that way the extension jamb, we could have relieved them and brought them in. In order to get that away from the ceiling, we actually had to make the sash a little bit thinner. You might notice down the side of that window. And that was just so we could bring the casing away from the ceiling just a little bit, and then down from the ceiling a little bit. So the sash was less important than where the casing landed in this example. And they did a nice job centering that window up, even if it was a little bit off center. You can see that sash got quite small right here. This side and the top was the same size, but it just got really tight here. And it was mostly just to accommodate that ceiling. You can see this cabinet's scribed tightly to the floor with veneer. It's very difficult to cut that veneer without damaging it They did a great job doing that, and they made it tight to the floor. It was important to not run shoe molding for one reason, because there's a radius base, but the other reason was we were told not to have shoe molding there. Nice tight cut on the baseboard, again going up. And again, this cabinet just barely longer than the style, and that's what I wanted, so that countertop can die into the side there. And then having put this piece of toe kick on, in part because you can see the appliances have a nice register in the bottom of them, and the architect may want us to relieve this baseboard so it has a wooden register, but I'm not sure it's a good idea. And you can see over there that appliance is actually flush right now, and it's sticking past on the toe kick. So we may build that toe kick out. You know, we'll figure it out, but it's not something we know right now. So it was wise for him to just leave it. And we'll leave it on the counter for the finisher, along with the appliance panels. You can see the carpenter did a great job with a nail consistent in every corner. It's not like bam, bam, you know, it's very consistent at a good spot that's easy to putty. You know, if you put a nail way inside here, it's very hard to putty that and make it a smooth finish. So you can see this baseboard. This is a long piece of baseboard. We had to have a joint in the baseboard, so they strategically put it right in the center of that receptacle. It's to hide the maximum amount with a switch on the cover plate. That's the long receptacle. That's the long piece of base. We also did it at this joint here at the ridge beam. The ridge beam came over. We had to have a joint in it. So the guys worked real hard to get that joint very good. And then we ended up only seeing just a little bit of it. Had it been over 12 inches more to the left, you'd have seen it on all three sides. But because they did it right in the middle of the two beams intersecting, and there's a light going there, so we even put a little mock-up piece to hide some of that beam, because we had to get it approved, you know, just to make sure the joint looked good enough. So that's the Brandstrom job. Nice slate tile, old house, Myers Park. And this is our work area. Nice dumpster setup. Got some drops of the beams to pick up and deliver to the shop. Got our scaffolding in a nice spot. Guys will come tomorrow and scoop that up. And we had all our trim in the garage on that left side. The builder even had an HVAC system to keep our trim acclimated for the weather that we had.